Assassin's Creed Valhalla is shaping up to be a very good game, and not just a good open world RPG that Ubisoft loves to do, but a good Assassin's Creed game, which we haven't had in quite a long time. That being said, listening to some of the wisest people in this series, we should not follow things blindly and we should create our own opinions on them. So today I wanted to give a few of my concerns for the game, as I haven't really talked about that. This doesn't mean that I have terrible expectations for the game. I do think that this game could come out and be very, very good based off of the things that I've heard from people who have played the game, as well as just from what I've seen from the game. That being said, I do still have some concerns in regards to this game. So before we start, remember that if you do enjoy today's video, to leave it a nice, thick, and juicy like as always. And of course, if you enjoy content like this, as well as content like my coverage of Cyberpunk 2077, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, Ghost of Tsushima Legends, or Battlefield, make sure you hit that big red sexy subscribe button right underneath the video. I would also like to do a quick thank you to my channel members. I really appreciate it greatly. You guys are awesome, and thank you very much. So let's start this video. So my first concern is the Assassin Templar conflict taking a back seat in this game, and there's a couple of ways that this can happen. Now, I do know that we have an Assassin's Bureau inside of Ravensthorpe where our settlement is, and that's all fine and dandy. What I'm worried about is if the only way that we get any kind of Assassin's Creed content is by doing the little side missions that are going to be in there, and we just go hunt down some generic NPCs that are dressed up like Templars and then call it a day when we return and Hytham tells us like a few words about the conflict. I really hope it's not reserved to that, and I really hope that the main villains in this game are members of the Order of the Ancients or the Templars. I really hope that's the case, because if not, if that's the only way we're really seeing this kind of conflict and there's just like a web of Templars that we go out and stab because Hytham tells us to, that would be pretty shallow and pretty disappointing. Now, I don't think that this is going to be like the original AC games. If anything, I could see it being something like Assassin's Creed Black Flag, where there is an Assassin's Creed storyline at the very center of things, but it's not the focus of the game most of the time. I could see it being something like that. I do really love Black Flag, and I can deal with the pirate fantasy being top notch in that, but I do also really enjoy the storyline of the Assassins vs. Templars when it does come to light at the major moments of the story, when you finally get into that last act and those things become very important. I hope that's the case here. I also hope that the main villains aren't simply people with general ties to the Order of the Ancients. It was very annoying and just random in Origins when you get through this whole story, and at the end of the story there's this twist where Caesar kind of turns on you and then he becomes the villain. Then you chase Flavius through the Green Mountains and then he's the villain. There's a bit of a disconnect there. That wasn't a great climactic moment for Bayek. I know he kind of got redemption for him and his son, but he wasn't all that fleshed out. He wasn't a very good villain, and I hope that's not the case here. I prefer the much more direct villains, the people who are Templars, to be the villains. Obviously, we do end up assassinating Caesar in the end, but this whole little side adventure where we go find Flavius felt kind of pointless. It would have been nice if it was Caesar running through that area and then we just barely don't catch him at the end, and then we go to Rome and take him out. I think that would have been nice, or maybe even fought Septimius in that part of the game as opposed to Flavius. Flavius he was a nobody. It was like take Assassin's Creed 2 and instead of trying to get Rodrigo Borgia at the very end, it's his altar boy instead. He was the real villain the whole time, and that's who we fight. That's basically the equivalent of what happened in Origins, which wasn't a good thing, and I hope that's not something that happens here. I hope some of the kings that we take on, I hope some of the major villains that we take on are members of the Order of the Ancients. I know in the demo they said, oh yeah, this king we're about to take out, he has ties to the Order of the Ancients. I don't care about that. I want him to be a member of that cult. I want him to be a member of that order. That's what I want. That is far more interesting than, oh yeah, it's not him. It's like the guy in his court to the side there. See, he's in the blue with the gold necklace. That's the bad guy. I hope you find him interesting because we'll kill him later. I know the main guy is like doing all these terrible things, but don't worry about him. We'll replace him. You want to kill the guy in his little blue tunic over there. I don't care about that. That's not interesting in any way. I hope that is not the case for most of the characters in the game. I hope that the villains are supposed to be the villains. It would bring the Assassin Templar conflict to not maybe the forefront of the game, but much more in play, as opposed to if the reverse were the case. It would mean that the villains are villains not only in history, but also villains in the Assassin's Creed universe, and it just makes a lot more sense and it's far more interesting in that regard. The other thing I want to talk about is general goofiness, and I don't mean with the open world necessarily. I think there are going to be your occasional goofy open world interactions or open world events. I think that's going to happen from time to time. I doubt they're going to do too many of those. Sure, one here and there is fine. If they do too many, that would be a problem, but I don't think that'll be the case. What I'm really worried about is just the janky, goofy animations. This is mostly the facial animations and some of the voice acting. It'll really take you out of a really good side quest if you get to the end and just terrible animations take over, or maybe someone who's supposed to be important to this side quest has just the most generic voice actor you've ever heard. That would be a pretty big problem. You don't want to go through this kind of emotional quest line, get to the end and it's just like Google Maps talking to you. That would not be the most interesting thing in the world, and it can really take you out of a good moment. I'm not totally worried about some of the main characters in the game. So far from what we've seen, the voice acting seems to be really good. I can say for sure now that I've watched The Last Kingdom that Magnus Brun, who plays Eivor, or the male Eivor, is a really good actor, and I'm really excited to see his performance in game, as well as the same for Sigurd, female Eivor, Alfred. All those other guys I am very interested to see how their performances come across once we actually get through the story. But again, I don't know how much they've smoothed out those facial animations. I don't think voice acting is going to change all that much. I doubt they're re-recording tons of lines and implementing them, but facial animations, we'll see. We haven't seen the final build of them, just kind of gotta wait and see on that one. The last thing I want to talk about is the combat. The combat looks cartoonish, like too cartoonish in my opinion. I know Ghost of Tsushima is a high bar to beat, and I know it's a very different style of gameplay, but in Ghost of Tsushima, when you are a samurai, the combat feels like a samurai. You're very calm yet precise in your movements. Everything feels very much in control, and all the combat comes down to timing and speed. And it's a very satisfying system, whereas you watch Valhalla's combat and it looks a little too cartoony. It looks a little goofy at times. Eivor's swinging this giant bearded Dane axe, and it just looks like it's weightless, and the movements are a little exaggerated, and it just doesn't look right. It just looks too cartoony. He's leaping in the air like he's LeBron James or something. I don't know. It doesn't look right. When you dodge, it looks a little floaty and you face away from your enemy for some reason. It doesn't look right. It feels goofy. It feels cartoony. It doesn't feel grounded in reality like the rest of the game is supposed to be, which I think can take you out of the moment. And while I would want that to mean that I can try and maybe put an emphasis on stealth in my gameplay, that seems to be taking a bit of a backseat as well. Even though they've brought back some of the mechanics like turning on guaranteed assassinate, as well as being able to have things like social stealth, even then you're inevitably going to have to get in combat at some point. The raids are going to be big open combat areas. There's going to be a lot of times where stealth just isn't viable, and the combat is something that is major in this game and something that needed to be nailed down. And from what I've seen, it just looks goofy. The abilities, once the animations and when the camera angle changes, just looks a little weird. It kind of takes you out of the moment. I don't know if they did that to make it feel more intense. It may feel that way once I get my hands on it. I don't know. It looks weird. It looks goofy and cartoonish. I don't know. Maybe they've polished it a little bit and it's a little bit different now, but it doesn't look right. It doesn't look like it's grounded in reality, and it's kind of weird, like I've said 1,000 times already. I don't know. We'll have to see once I get my hands on it. Obviously, again, it's not the final build that we have seen, although I doubt much has changed. We will see once the game does finally release. So anyway, I know that I have thrown a little bit of hate on the game. I am still very optimistic about it and where it's going. Even though Darby has been the only one marketing the assassin part of things, I am still optimistic that this will have an Assassin's Creed experience at the core, and I am very excited for that. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy, then as always, remember to leave a nice, thick, and juicy like. And of course, I will see you in the next video.